Welcome into On Deck. I'm Tyler Redmond, and I've been talking about this all week, and it's finally here. Kevin McAlpin from 680 The Fan is on deck today. And Kevin, thanks for being here with me. I really appreciate it. First off, can you tell my viewers who don't know you kind of what your role is following the Braves?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm in my 9th season, or at least hopefully this will be my 9th season with the Braves radio network. I started out in Philly at ESPN Radio covering the Philadelphia Phillies. But in 2012, had an opportunity to come down here to Atlanta and cover the Braves on a full-time basis. So basically, a day in the life of what we do is we get to the ballpark about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, do all the interviews you hear on the pregame show, do all the social media, all the stats, everything during the game, and then all the interviews you hear on the postgame show as well. We also have a segment on our morning show called Atlanta Braves Today, where we spend about 10, 15 minutes recapping the night before, talk about injury news, talk about trade rumors, things like that. We do that every morning here in Atlanta. And then now we're hosting a show from 7 to 9 in lieu of play-by-play. We're calling it Guys Night Out, which is kind of ironic because none of us are out right now. We're all in. We're actually in 3 different locations. I'm doing the show from my home office. Ben is at his apartment, and Jonathan's at his parents' basement doing the show. But it's been fun, man. We've been having a lot of great guests: Chipper Jones, Tom Glavine, Dale Murphy. We've had some really, really heavy hitters here lately. So it's been a lot of fun. So it's a lot of baseball. And I'll be honest with you, that's what I'm missing the most. I love talking about the game, talking about what we saw the night before, the X's and O's, things like that. So when you're used to doing that every day, and we were in the middle of it at spring training, it's kind of weird to have all this free time. But at the end of the day, I've got an almost 5-year-old. So the bright spot of this is we're getting a lot of extra bonus family time here.
For sure. Well, you just mentioned that you were at spring training when all this stuff happened. Where were you? How did you find out? Can you just run me through that? I mean, it had to have been somewhat of a crazy time.
The whole week was bizarre. It kind of started on Monday night. We were taking on the Boston Red Sox at Cool Today Park in Northport when we got a memo from Major League Baseball that the clubhouses were going to be closed to the media effective Tuesday to try to protect players from, contracting this awful disease. So that was Monday night. We had games Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we were in Lakeland, Florida, taking on the Detroit Tigers Thursday afternoon when we heard that, hey, this game may or may not happen. We don't know. The NBA had already shut down. The NHL was about to shut down. And then in about the 4th or 5th inning, we got word, Major League Baseball officially announced that spring training effective 4 p.m. Thursday was going to be essentially ending, or at least going on hiatus. The interesting thing about that was we were playing the game. Now, this is a lot different than a regular season game. When big news happens during the regular season, you've got guys that will run up the tunnel from the clubhouse and let guys in the dugout know, hey, this just happened. I think back to when I covered the Phillies and the U.S. got Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
We were playing the Mets that night. I was at the ballpark.
That's crazy.
You saw guys running up the tunnel from the clubhouse to tell people. But you can't do that in spring training because the clubhouse is way out in right field. So as soon as the game was over, the PA announcer at Joker Marchant Stadium in Lakeland made the announcement to the fans, many of whom had already known. They've checked their phone or had gotten texts or emails or tweets. But the interesting thing was that's how Brian Snitker and the guys who were in the game actually found out that spring training was over. They made the announcement, so they're walking off the field, and I got basically the first gut reaction from Snit. Hey, you just found out 2 minutes ago. What are your initial thoughts? So it was really interesting to see the way these guys had no idea, and here we are getting them minutes after the reaction. But the even more fascinating thing to this whole story was Friday morning, we had a conference call with Alex Anthopoulos. And at the time, the plan was to shut the Braves complex down for Saturday and Sunday, do a deep clean, reconvene Monday morning. Well, that's 11 a.m. Friday. I went to Venice Beach with a couple of the guys we work with. By 3 o'clock, we had gotten word that this may not be restarting at all. By 5 o'clock, I was back at our spring training house packing all my stuff, and Saturday morning at 6 a.m., I was driving back to Atlanta. So it goes to show you, you want to talk about your head spinning. The NBA shutting down, the NCAA tournament's canceled, all major sports, everything is grinding to a halt. So in the matter of 5 full days, you went from everything is fine, everything is normal. We're covering baseball, we're in the clubhouse doing interviews like normal, to I'm driving back and I'm pulling out in front of my house here in Marietta at 2 p.m. to surprise my wife and son, who had no idea I was coming home that early.
Yeah. Well, I got to be honest with you. My family had a spring training trip planned, and we found out, I believe, Thursday that spring training was canceled, and we were leaving on Friday. So, yeah, it was a bit. I'm glad we found out when we did, and we weren't on the way down or anything. But it was very shocking at how quick everything had turned, like you said. And to be honest with you, when the NBA shut down, I was thinking the entire time, MLB's not going to shut down. There's no way they shut down. I guess just out of my own stubbornness, and I was wrong. And I mean, what kind of shock did you have just hearing the news yourself?
I wasn't surprised given the fact that the NBA had closed down already. We knew the NHL. Matter of fact, that Thursday when we were in Lakeland, in my car, I had my Flyers jersey and hat. The Flyers were supposed to play the Lightning that night in Tampa, and I had scored a couple of tickets. So on my way back from Lakeland, I was going to swing through Tampa and go to the hockey game. Of course, that hockey game never happened. But it was a little, it's just your head was spinning with everything and how fast. I think the thing was how fast it all happened. Yeah. You went from normal. You went from playing games, and my family had been there the week before. They had left Saturday, March 7th, and I was home Saturday, March 14th. I wasn't supposed to be back from that first road trip till April 2nd. So just the fact that everything just came to such a grinding halt, and it's the smart thing to do. You had to do it. At the time, I think there was some folks saying, maybe is this a little bit of a reach, or is this an overreaction to what's going on? But obviously now, weeks later, we found out that's not the case at all. I think just how quickly it happened was probably the most bizarre part of the whole thing. But again, looking back, it was the right thing to do.
So you mentioned how quick everything happened. Everything's slowing down now. We're all kind of able to take a breath and look around. Yeah. What would you like to see MLB do based on what we know right now? Obviously the option of you saw the story, the report, whether it be true or not, that MLB was considering returning in May. What would you say to that? What would you say to the thought of MLB having a condensed season or anything of that nature?
Well, this is just my opinion. I think May is too soon. I think it's too quick. We're still at a point now where, you're starting to see that curve turn a little bit, but also, my hometown of Philadelphia is in the crosshairs now. They're saying that could be the next city that, comes under, major issues when it comes to coronavirus. Washington, D.C. I still think it's too early. The plan in theory has some areas that make sense as far as having all the teams quarantined together, playing in front of empty ballparks. Where it gets a little weird for me is when we're talking about the home plate umpire having to stand a lot further back with the electronic strike zone and players having to sit in the stands because they can't sit in the dugout. And then, you think about these guys that have families. There's a lot of guys that have kids, wives. Think about Zach Wheeler's comments this week. He's got a baby on the way in July. Mike Trout and his wife are expecting their first child in August. Heck, selfishly, my wife and I have a baby on the way in October. The thought of being away from my family for those months, going through the pregnancy by themselves, I just find it very hard to believe you're going to find, an overwhelming majority of guys that will say, yes, we can do it. Now, that being said, in my opinion, there's no such thing as a bad idea right now. I think you throw as much stuff out there, see what sticks, and maybe ultimately you end up picking and choosing a few from here and a few from there. And in June, July, maybe you can restart this thing and do it in a much safer environment. Now, whether that means everyone going to one spot, whether that means Florida and Arizona, where everyone has their spring training sites, or whether it means we get to a point in July, August, September where you can actually play in your own ballparks. I guess the one holdback I have is the travel aspect. We travel a lot. We're on the road all the time. To try to minimize travel, maybe you have longer series. Instead of having go to Toronto to play 2 games, which to me still makes no sense, even in a regular scenario. Maybe you go play the Marlins and you play a 5 or 6 game series. You can knock out more games. You're not traveling as much. I think that's a solution that would help. My thinking is if you can start the regular season by July, that gives you July, August, September. You can go into October with doubleheaders, I think you can conservatively get somewhere between 85 and 100 games. And then you can have the postseason through October, maybe November. And maybe then you get to a point where you're saying, okay, look, we have 8 ballparks that are either domed facilities or retractable roof facilities. So maybe we can hold the playoffs and World Series in a neutral location, again, to minimize travel. And look, you can say the World Series, it's going to happen in Toronto this year. And guess what? All 7 games are going to be there, no matter who's playing. Again, you're not traveling. You can do it quicker. We did see the interesting story last night. We talked about it here in Atlanta on 680 The Fan on Guys Night Out, our show. The Tom Verducci possibility of playing, I think it was 40-some games, 43 games, with the playoffs being 40-some games. You could do it start to finish, opening day to Game 7 of the World Series in about 80 days. That could also work as well. Look, nothing about this season, if there is a season, and again, I crossed my fingers when you said it, nothing is going to be conventional about the 2020 season in any sport. Yeah. But just trying to find a way to get it in and get as many games in as possible, I think they're going to do whatever they can. So again, in my opinion, there's no bad idea right now. Throw everything out there, and then maybe ultimately you're going to get to the finish line by choosing some of the things that make the most sense down the road.
Yeah, when people were asking me what I thought about the report in May, obviously any baseball fan would love to see that happen, a baseball return in May. But when I saw the rules and everything else, it made me question it. However, if an electronic strike zone brings back baseball this season, I can live with it for one season, because it's going to be an unconventional season either way. And
yeah, I'll just say this too, to that point. I mean, again, that's something that's already been worked on in the minors, so it wouldn't be totally new technology. For sure. Obviously, it's still not a perfect system. But you're right. If that allows them to at least get started, so be it. I think there's just so many people and players alike that just want to see this thing get started.